Join me tonight on Twitch and every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we will play NFL trivia for cash prizes. Link to play below. And now, on with our feature presentation. It's always important that you never overlook your opponent, and that you treat your opponent with respect. There's the saying, any given Sunday for a reason, where on any given day in the National Football League, when one group of professionals line up against another group of professionals, you never know who is going to come out on top. That's why they play the games on the field. Heck, some of the biggest upsets in NFL history came because the team that was favored didn't take the underdog seriously in the slightest bit. No matter how good your team is, or no matter how bad the other team is, you have to make sure that your players take the game seriously, that they understand the assignment, and that they go out there and play well. Because any team that plays poorly and sloppy, no matter how good they are, can fall victim to an unsuspecting loss. However, there's a massive difference between treating your opponent with respect and not overlooking them, and, well, doing whatever the heck the San Francisco 49ers did during this game right here in 1966 against the Baltimore Colts. Look, it's important to take your opponent seriously and believe that they're a good team and devise the right game plan to beat them. But you can go way too far in that direction by not just saying that they're a good team, but by flat out saying that there's no chance whatsoever that you're going to win the game, and by conceding defeat before the opening kickoff. It's a bizarre situation that deserves a deep dive nearly 60 years later, because it's one of the strangest bits of coaching before a game, and unsurprisingly, it backfired in rather spectacular fashion, a la when San Diego Chargers head coach Tommy Prothro tried a similar strategy against the Pittsburgh Steelers nearly a decade later, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Because this is the story behind one of the dumbest bits of coaching in the more than 75-year history of the San Francisco 49ers franchise. Before I talk about the incident in question and what exactly was so bad about it, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as who the 49ers were even playing, since that plays a big part in this story. It's September 25th, 1966. It's week 3 of a brand new NFL season, and we've got a big game on our hands in the West Division between the Baltimore Colts and the San Francisco 49ers over at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore. The importance of this game for the 49ers cannot be overstated, as even though we're still in September and we've technically just started fall, the Niners need to win this game to potentially keep their season alive. Back in 1966, only the division winner made it into the playoffs. If you didn't win your division, then tough luck. You were out. You figured based on prior history that you had the ability over the course of a 14-game season to fail and win 3 games. And seeing as the 49ers already tied the Minnesota Vikings 20-20 on the road in their opening game of the season, making that one of the 3 games that they didn't win, they really needed this one against the Colts. Lose or tie this one, and not only do you remain winless after 3 weeks, seeing as the 49ers had a bye week in week 2, since there were 15 teams in the league following the addition of the Atlanta Falcons necessitating a bye week due to an odd number of teams, and not only do you stay out of the win column for the 4th straight game dating back to last season, but you essentially have to run the table the rest of the way to have any shot at making it to the playoffs for the first time since 1957, and for just the 2nd time since you joined the NFL after the merger with the AAFC. And if that wasn't bad enough for the 49ers, remember how the 49ers tied the Vikings in week 1? In week 2, the Vikings played this team right here, the Baltimore Colts, as in the team that the 49ers were set to play in week 3. And this game for the Colts, which gave them plenty of momentum heading into their week 3 contest against San Francisco, went incredibly well for them. Even though the Colts got off to an unusually slow start, trailing 16-0 midway through the second quarter. From that point on, Baltimore could do no wrong, as they scored 30 of the game's final 45 points to win it 38-23. Over the final 2.5 quarters, the Colts were averaging over a point per minute, as they were wildly efficient on the offensive side of the ball. It was another great day at the office for arguably the best quarterback in football at the time, and one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Johnny Unitas, as he finished the game with 241 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 102.5. As a side note, to learn more about just how good Johnny Unitas was, and how much of a legend he was, click the card in the upper right corner. Tight end John Mackey, who was neck and neck with Mike Ditka by this point in the mid-60s for the best tight end in football, had 6 receptions for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns, having arguably the best game of his Hall of Fame career. And as much of a threat as the Colts were through the air, they were also a threat on the ground, averaging over 4 yards per carry during the game. You had guys like Tom Matte, Lenny Moore, and Jerry Hill, who were some of the top runners in the game and were extremely reliable when called upon. There's a reason that people view the Colts as one of the best teams in football, both before and after that Week 2 game against the Vikings that you've been watching. And it was because of their offense, riddled with future Hall of Fame players at or near the prime of their careers. The previous year, in 1965, the Colts made it to the playoffs thanks to a great offense that averaged 27.8 points per game, which ranked 3rd in the league behind the Chicago Bears, and oddly enough, the San Francisco 49ers. In fact, the offense was so good that during the final game of the season, due to injuries, they had to play running back Tom Matte at quarterback, and the team still won the game while picking up 264 yards of total offense. Imagine the Kendall Hinton experiment from the Broncos Saints COVID game in 2020 actually working. That's what this was like. That's how good they were offensively. Now you had a stacked offense going up against the 49ers, a team who, in 1965, despite having the top offense in football, only won 7 out of 14 games due to a defense that allowed 402 points, or 28.7 points per game, which was the second worst total in the league and was only better than the Minnesota Vikings by 1 measly point. How were the 49ers in this game right here against the Colts, a team that swept them in 1965, 1964, and 1963, a team that had won 7 straight against the 49ers, and a team that was undefeated against head coach Jack Christensen, going to win this game? Well, that's the funny part. They weren't. Obviously, the 49ers respected the Colts and knew how good they were. To think otherwise would just be ridiculous at this point, considering literally everything that had transpired. But during the press conference, when the coaching staff met with the reporters, the coaches were absolutely terrified of the Colts in the same way that a kid with stage fright is scared of an audition, or a kid who didn't study for a test is scared when they walk into class and know they have to get it over with. If they said something like, "We know the Colts are a great team, and we're going to need a heck of a game plan and a performance to stop them," then fine. That's a non-story. That's generic coach speak. If they said something like, "Johnny Unitas might be the greatest quarterback to ever do it, and we're going to need something special to stop him," all right, no problem with that. Once again, that's generic coach speak. If they said something like, "This is one of the best offenses in football. They've got talent everywhere, and it's going to be tough to stop them since they've got so many great players and so many weapons," again, nothing wrong with that. But the 49ers coaching staff? Yeah, they did not do that. Instead, they took a completely different approach. Instead, they conceded the game to the Colts before it even kicked off. Jack Christensen saw the films from the Colts-Vikings game and got so sick and so scared from watching them that he literally got sick and fell to the ground. You know how sometimes people faint when they see something unsettling and they get sick and vomit and whatnot, or they hear really bad news and they faint, the head coach of a football team did that when trying to scout his opponent. Now, some reports indicate that this was just an unfortunate coincidence and that Christensen legitimately had a virus and had acted up while he was watching film, while other reports indicate that he was perfectly healthy, especially since he was back the next day and got sick as a direct result of watching the Colts film against the Vikings and as a direct result of watching Johnny Unitas play. Either way, that's always a good sign. But as if that wasn't bad enough, defensive coordinator Dick Forrest, who was known for being one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, seeing as he was the head coach of Virginia from 1958 to 1960, and went 1-29, losing a then NCAA major college record 28 straight games, so he clearly knew what he was doing, added more fuel to the fire. He said to the press, "With that offense, I don't see how the Colts can lose a game." Dude, you're literally playing them this week. What do you mean you don't see how the Colts can lose a game? Way to give faith in your team. Again, you don't have to flat out say to the press, "We can beat these guys," or "We're going to win the game." But don't say that. Say anything but that. Say anything but, "Yeah, this offense is too good. They're not losing a game. Pack it up, boys. We've got no shot." And then, if that wasn't bad enough, Voris decided to keep talking and said, "I've never seen Johnny Unitas look like anything but the best quarterback in the business." And with receivers like John Mackey and Raymond Berry running the ball the way they did at Minnesota, and with two-time Pro Bowl wideout Jimmy Orr back, you can see why I'm scared to death. That's right, folks. The defensive coordinator of the Colts' opponent is saying that he is scared to death. Not only do we have a head coach on the 49ers who literally got sick after watching the film of the Colts because he knew his team was a dead duck, and not only do we have a defensive coordinator saying that the Colts won't lose another game this season, even though the 49ers had to play them twice, but we've got a defensive coordinator who is flat out admitting that he is scared to death. Good job. You just broke the number one rule for any competitive competition. Never let them see your fear. And you did it before the game even kicked off. Way to have faith in your teammates. How do you think the players must have felt after this, seeing as their coaching staff was flat out saying before the game that they had no shot to win this one? How do you think the players must have felt, seeing as their coaching staff admitted that they had no game plan since they were too scared? How do you think the players must have felt, seeing as their coaching staff said that they were not going to be able to stop the opponent? And from everything I can tell, this wasn't some awful attempt at reverse psychology. The coaching staff genuinely meant it, that they could not, under any circumstances, win this game. It's odd for a few reasons, aside from the obvious of why you're admitting this in the first place. But I've talked enough about that aspect already. Number one, the Colts were a great team with a great offense. Don't get me wrong. You got Johnny Unitas, you got a shot to win every game. But it's not as though they were unstoppable. It's not like this was the dream team going up against some teenagers from Japan who just learned how to play basketball a day ago. This was still a battle between two professional football teams. The Colts were stifled for much of the first half against the Vikings, a team who had the worst defense in football in 1965, worse than San Francisco's. It was only toward the end of the first half that they really got the ball rolling. The Colts scored just 3 points in their opener against the Green Bay Packers. And dating back to the 1965 season, including the playoffs, the Colts were held to 10 points or less in 3 out of 6 games, so half the time. There was a way to stop this team. It had been done. It was obviously going to be tough, and no one was saying or suggesting otherwise. But it was not impossible. And number two, the 49ers literally played the Colts extremely tight both times in 1965. Even though the 49ers came out on the losing end of things, it wasn't by much. The Colts won 27-24 in Week 3, in a game where the 49ers actually had more yards of offense than the Colts. And the Colts won 34-28 in Week 7, in a game where, once again, the 49ers had more yards of total offense than the Colts. 2 games decided by a combined 9 points. That's it. Yes, the Colts were going to be a tough out. And yes, the Colts were favored to win this one on their home field, as Baltimore was favored by 13.5 points. So it definitely would have been an upset if the 49ers won, and no one was suggesting otherwise. But it was not impossible for the 49ers to win, or at the very least, not to the point where their coaching staff should literally be conceding the game to them beforehand and getting sick watching film, trying to figure out how to stop them. Which is why it won't come as a surprise to you whatsoever, especially based on the game footage that you've been watching this whole time, that seeing as the 49ers coaching staff conceded defeat beforehand by saying that no team was going to beat the Colts and that they were scared to death, that the Colts just completely torched them. Who knew having confidence actually mattered? Because when the final gun went off, it was the Colts who were victorious, coming out on top in front of their home fans convincingly by a final score of 36-14, in a game that wasn't even that close, seeing as the Colts led 36-7 late in the fourth quarter before a garbage time touchdown by the 49ers during a 5-possession game. And seeing as the main reason for San Francisco's concerns was Baltimore's offense, let's talk specifically about the offense, because once again, it was firing on all cylinders. San Francisco really wasn't kidding when they said they had no game plan for stopping it. Johnny Unitas threw for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Colts, as a team, ran for 168 yards on over 5 yards per carry, with Tony Lorick, the former second-round pick in the 1964 NFL Draft, getting the bulk of the work, picking up 110 yards on 18 carries, coming out to over 6.1 yards per carry. The Colts had 379 yards of total offense, and at one point in the contest, scored 33 straight points, completely putting the game out of reach by the time the second half rolled around. All in all, this game went exactly as expected, considering the fact that not even the 49er coaches thought they had a chance at winning this one and stopping Baltimore's offense. And again, I have no problem with showing respect to an opponent and saying that they're going to be a tough team to beat and that they're a really good team and whatnot. That's normal. That's a natural part of the game, and that's to be completely expected. The last thing you want to do is give any bulletin board material whatsoever. But to do this, to literally get sick from watching film on them, to admit that you're scared to death of figuring out a way to stop them, and to say, straight up, that they're not going to lose another game this season, implying that they'll beat you not just this time, but the next time you play them in a few weeks? That's way too far in the other direction. That's not fair to the fans. That's not fair to the players. And that's just a horrible way to coach and go through life. How can the players believe in you if you don't even believe in you, and you don't believe in them? Because even though the Colts beat the 49ers 36-14 on September 25th, 1966, the game was just a formality. Because based on everything that the 49ers were saying and thinking, they probably won that game a few days beforehand. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.